Hello, welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you here for the New York City Local Law 97 webinar with our hosts, NERIS, who do planning and compliance. I see a couple of people still coming into the program, so we will get started in just a couple of minutes here. So stand by and we'll be right with you. Thank you. All righty. Well, we want to be respectful of everyone's time today. And thank you so much for being here. Greetings, 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 and welcome to the NERIS webinar on New York City Local Law 97. My name is Alyssa Miller, founder and CEO of iMiller Public Relations, a PR firm for the global digital infrastructure industry. In today's program, your presenters will provide you an overview of the carbon reduction laws for real estate owners, managers, and developers. And now I get the distinct pleasure of introducing you to your presenters. Our first presenter today is Maria Jarina. She is a seasoned civil engineer, project manager, and sustainability enthusiast who excels in data management, strategy, and compliance. She helps organizations reduce their carbon footprint and navigate climate change impact mitigation with an efficient and sustainable approach, ensuring compliance with environmental regulations. And she has her master's in sustainability and a BSc in civil engineering. Our next presenter is Christine Cinquez. Christine is the founder and president of NERIS LLC, a leader in sustainable solutions. The company expedites permits, manages grants, ensures environmental compliance, and delivers infrastructure projects nationwide. With more than a decade of experience at the helm of NERIS, Christine has an MS in environmental policy and management with a concentration in sustainability. She is also an NYC DOB Class 2 filing representative, number 6931. And without further ado, I now hand over the program to Maria, who will get us started. Thank you.
Oops. Thank you, Alyssa, and welcome to everyone today. We have a 45-minute presentation that will begin with an overview of Local Law 97, the latest rule packages, and then we will provide a timeline of the various implementation phases. Then we will go over the technical details with a case study illustrating how to calculate emissions and caps, then comparing them between the two implementation phases and then calculating penalties. Next, we'll be going into the implementation reporting, defining penalty mitigation, good faith efforts, and the penalty enforcement frameworks. Then we will close it all up and then provide you with some key takeaways and recommendations. After the presentation, we have a 15-minute Q&A session, so feel free to ask your questions anytime during the presentation in the chat feature of GoToWebinar. There are also some handouts there that you might find useful. Okay. So let's begin by highlighting that the real estate sector is a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Currently it accounts for nearly 40% of the total emissions, surpassing both transportation and industrial industries combined. So this really underscores the urgency for sustainable practices in construction and operations of buildings. And as a result, New York City has elected to implement Local Law 97 4 years ago, and this is to improve energy efficiency and limit greenhouse gas emissions for buildings. So these emission limits are approximately for 40 to 50,000 New York City buildings, which is nearly 60% of the city's building area, or 3.1 billion square feet. It applies to all types of buildings, 25,000 square feet or more. So with this law, emissions calculated are based on tons of CO2 per square foot, and a penalty is imposed of 268 tons per CO2 equivalent, and will become more stringent over time. The first report is due May 1st, 2025 for the previous year's emissions, and it's due annually, and it will need to be signed off by a registered design professional, so a PE or a registered architect. There are special rules for affordable housing and houses of worship. Relief is also provided in cases of financial hardship, unavoidable implementation hurdles, and good faith efforts. The ultimate goal is to achieve 80% reduction of GHG emissions by 2050 and an interim goal of 40% reduction by 2030. So DOB has issued 2 rule packages so far, and these rule packages expanded on the property types, which enhance accuracy in calculating emissions limits. The emissions limits were set for each property type up to 2050. Beyond 2050, a zero emissions requirement is set in order to align with the climate target. There is also electrification support, reduce electricity carbon coefficient from 2040 to reflect a greener grid. It also expanded on the renewable energy credits, which can only offset emissions from electricity use at this time. And then proposed rules address technical compliance details, such as methods of calculating emissions from various systems. It detailed prescriptive path upgrades, and it defined criteria for good faith efforts and exemptions for covered buildings that are doing the work, but are still unable to meet the annual carbon limit. So these rules also provide penalty enforcement frameworks, which will be discussed later in the presentation. And it's important to note that further rulemaking is planned. And now we have a poll just to gauge where you all are in understanding Local Law 97. Okay. Okay. So here, okay, I see that 91% is not very familiar. So that's good. I hope that we can enlighten you on some of the recent DOB rulings. So just to give an overview of the timeline, you can see here it's the cities and states electrification and decarbonization timeline. So for the city, there are 5 phases, and the first phase is a warm-up phase, and it starts very soon in 2024. About 5 to 6 years after, the phase 2 will start in 2030, and it's significantly more strict. And this is because New York State's plan on greening the grid. So by 2030, 70% of the electricity will be from renewables, and about 40%, 100% will be carbon free by 2040. So I really want to highlight this important fact, and this will be also illustrated in the case study a little bit later. The main takeaway really from this timeline is that Local Law 97's success hinges on a clean grid. So starting in 2024, the law assigns emissions limits for over 60 different property types from Energy Star's portfolio manager that reflects a wide variation in energy use among buildings. These limits ratchet down over 5 compliance periods, so each building will be allowed to emit less carbon over time. So if you see here, we're using a hotel as an example. You can see how the carbon caps for phase 1 that starts in 2024 is at 9.87 kilograms per square foot. However, in the next phase, in 2030, it's significantly reduced to 3.85, and that's in alignment with the New York State greening of its grid. And then in phase 4 at 2040, where the grid will be 100% clean, it's at 1.47. And so with the first phase starting shortly, it's very important to start a compliance plan and see where you are currently, and if you meet the emissions targets for both 2024 period and 2030 period. And just a quick note on assigning property types, because there are a lot of questions about this. Buildings should be assigned per their descriptions in the property types section of Energy Star's Portfolio Manager. The reason for this is that DOB currently classifies property types according to occupancy use, such as life safety and fire issues and that. So Energy Star's Portfolio Manager is classified according to energy use. And every space on every floor of the building must be assigned a property type. And for ancillary spaces, not including shafts, stairwells, egress paths, etc., they should also be associated with a single building use, and they should be assigned a property type. And where ancillary spaces serve multiple buildings, ancillary spaces should be prorated and assigned proportionally across the different types in the building. And now Christine will go over the case study.
Thanks, Maria. Before we get started, we have a second poll for everyone. This is just kind of to help set the framework. So what is Local Law 84 as amended, Local Law 133? Ooh. Oh, great, everyone got it, okay. Good to know. Okay, so emission caps. So what we're looking at here is on the left is the New York City Building Code use groups, and they have been aligned with the Energy Star Portfolio Manager categories to basically assign your greenhouse gas targets. And here we've got them in tons per square feet and kilograms per square feet. Within the Portfolio Manager, you'll see here on the right, you would go under lodging and residential and then work your way down to hotel. This is reflecting the 2024 GHG targets, so 9.8 kilograms per square feet. Or 0.00987 tons per square feet. Okay, this is from New York City Department of Buildings. Again, here, this is comparing the building code intensity limits to the ESPM emissions factor. So you can see here that the building code is more lenient than the Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So during the current period, which is considered the warm-up period, 2024 through 2029, you will be given the option to calculate either using the building code intensity limits or the portfolio manager emissions factor. In this example, we're going to use the portfolio manager numbers, and we're going to take a look at a mixed-use property with a little over 230,000 square feet. Of that, about 30,000 square feet is residential space, and 30,000 is retail space, and 200,000 is residential. And you can see here on the right, you line up your mercantile and your residential to the GHG targets. And so here, group M, we've got 0.01181, and group R, we've got 0.00675. So we're going to take our square footage, multiply that by our GHG targets, and we're going to get 1,711 metric tons of CO2e. So this is the budget for our GHG emissions that are allowed using the portfolio manager targets. Next, we're going to calculate the actual building emissions. So in this instance, you're going to take a look at utility bills, you're going to take a look at your usage, and you're going to match up your energy sources with the GHG energy coefficients. So you can see here, fossil fuels have significantly higher, result in significantly higher emissions than other sources. And so the more fossil fuels that a building is using, the higher the emissions are going to be. So looking forward, when you're looking to decrease these emissions, one of the first things that you're going to look to reduce is your fossil fuel consumption. So in terms of calculating your emissions for the building, this is just a reminder of what our cap is. And then if we go to the next slide, one more, we can see here that in 2024, there's over 4 million kBTUs of gas and over 15 million kBTUs of electricity. So when we use these calculations, we come up with 1,632 metric tons of CO2e. So in this mixed use property example, you can see here that we are within the 2024 GHG target. Okay, so now let's look at 2030 to 2035. So you're going to use the same calculations. We're just going to be using the 2030 numbers, targets. So you can see here that the 2024 GHG targets are almost double of what the 2030 targets are. So we're looking at a substantial decrease in a pretty short period of time. So here we're doing the same calculation that we did before. We're matching up our group M, group R, we're multiplying it by the square footage. And for 2030, our carbon emission cap is 939 metric tons CO2e. So this is our cap. And then if we go back and let's say that no improvements were made to the building from 2024 through 2030, our calculated GHG emissions for the building would remain at 1,632 metric tons of CO2e. And by 2030, you'll see that we will be in excess of the permissible budget of 932 metric tons CO2e. And so we will need to come up with a plan to reduce emissions. And at this point, it's already a little late if you haven't done anything, so you're going to start being hit with the financial penalties. Penalty calculation. So here, this is relatively simple, but you know, if we're looking at 2030 and we've exceeded our GHG budget for our case study mixed use building of 693 metric tons of CO2e, we're actually going to take the 693, we're going to multiply it by $268, which gives us a penalty of over $185,000 for exceeding the 2030 emissions limits. Now, every year, we will continue to receive a penalty until we have corrective actions in place or are actually under the emissions limits. So when we're exceeding the limits, basically what are we going to do to work our way down and get below the permissible limits? Probably the easiest thing to do is reduce emissions by improving major building system energy efficiencies. So lighting, heating, cooling, controls, ventilation, domestic hot water, building envelope, elevators, roof, wall construction. And then more costly options would be installation of solar or green roofs or cool roofs. In this next slide, we have some examples of improvements that could be made and the corresponding greenhouse gas reductions. So let's say your building is performing pretty close to 2030 targets. You won't need to make a huge investment in getting within the allowable emissions cap. In this example here, investments in maintenance, low flow fixtures, air seal the building, heating systems, lighting improvements. Cumulatively, these could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 22 to 29%. If you have a building that is significantly underperforming, you would want to do all of the scope previously listed, but you would want to also improve roof insulation and air sealing, replace heating systems with more efficient systems, heating controls and sensors, and separate domestic hot water from your heating system. So cumulatively, we'd be looking here at 29 to 48%. And then in the very worst performing buildings, the lowest 20th percentile, you would want to be doing all of the above, plus installation of heat pump hot water heaters and upgrade old windows for a cumulative improvement of 44 to 63%. And with this, I'll pass it back over to Maria.
Okay, thank you, Christine. So a little note about Local Law 88. It requires common areas in residential buildings greater than 25,000 square feet and all areas in non-residential buildings greater than 25,000 square feet to upgrade lighting to meet current New York City Energy Conservation Code standards by 2025. So that's in alignment with this reporting requirement for Local Law 97. The law also requires all non-residential buildings greater than 25,000 square feet to install electrical submeters for each large non-residential tenant space greater than 5,000 square feet and provide monthly energy statements. The compliance deadline for both the lighting and submetering, like I said earlier, is 2025. And what are the reporting requirements for compliance? So building owners have two main compliance responsibility. First is to submit the annual building emissions report by May 1st, and there is a penalty for the penalty is the floor area times 50 cents per month until the report is submitted. And if we look back on the previous case study, you can see this is a significant amount of money that is issued per month. And the second requirement is penalty is the calculation is the overage times $268 per year. Okay, so the rule also provides penalty mitigation opportunities for the first compliance period only at this time. So this includes unexpected or unforeseeable events. This would be flood, fires, hurricanes, etc. And then all other mitigation opportunities fall within good faith efforts. And in order to claim this, building owners would need to submit 3 things: the emissions report, and compliance with any other adjustments, benchmarking, and then the light and sub-metering local 88 rule. So if all of this is demonstrated on the left here, the owner will also need to demonstrate one of the following items: a decarbonization pathway, which I will detail in the next slide, or complete a work of application approved by DOB. The work will be needed to meet the emissions limits for the compliance period. This would include the job numbers, timeline, estimated emissions reduction, etc. Or demonstrate that the building is working to achieve electrification readiness. So you're working with New York PA or Con Ed, and then this means that the owner has approved electrical applications for service upgrades. You need to provide a copy of the utilities response and a timeline of completion. An owner can also demonstrate that a building was under the emissions limit at some point during the compliance period, but now needs to adapt to get under the limit. But this doesn't apply for the first year because it needs to have previously been demonstrated for a compliance period. Critical facilities can provide evidence that a payment of penalty would impact its ability to provide critical services. And lastly, if a building is in a state of financial hardship that prohibits compliance, they must demonstrate by applying for financial hardship pursuant to Administrative Code 28.320.7, and this will be further worked out in the next rule package. So a decarbonization plan pathway is a plan for reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And it needs to include these items here: an energy audit, which would be a level 1 ASHRAE audit for buildings less than 50,000 square feet. And for buildings greater than that, it would be a level 2 ASHRAE. You need to provide an inventory of the major equipment, HVAC, lighting, hot water, and the date of installation. And then you need to provide a list of alterations needed for compliance. And this would be consisting of a timeline, a financing plan, and expected emissions reductions. You need to submit this at the same time, May 1st, 2025. And then you need to meet the 2024 limits by May 1st, 2027. And then you need to demonstrate that the work for 2030 compliance is underway by May 1st, 2028. And just want to also highlight that when you demonstrate that the work is under compliance, it means a complete application of the work approved by DOB. Okay, so if a building is over their emissions limit, DOB issues a notice of violation, or NOV, with the penalty amount, and then the building owner can either pay the penalties or go to adjudication by oath. And then however, if the building owner demonstrates good faith efforts, like I previously outlined earlier, then DOB can issue a mediated resolution that is a legally binding agreement, and DOB agrees not to pursue enforcement, and then the building owner agrees to the terms DOB has proposed for that building to come into compliance. So as long as the building owner is aligned or in compliance with the resolution, they can continue to submit their annual building's emissions report, and then DOB will monitor the progress of that building. However, if the building is at any point non-compliant with the terms of the mediated resolution, then DOB can enforce penalties that have not yet been enforced. So that wraps it about up, and so I just wanted to kind of sum everything up for you. So as we approach the imminent 2024 compliance phase, it's crucial to emphasize the need for proactive planning and starting early. Specifically, in the example that we provided, we saw a building that was in compliance for the first phase, but shortly after, within 5 years, the new compliance periods start. So, and a penalty of over $100,000 per year was imposed. So it's really crucial to make a plan because of the stricter compliance periods that are going to be phased in. So, and then I also want to stress the quality data. That quality data is important. So initiating a comprehensive plan, identifying the data owners, understanding the collection methods and the calculation methods, and ensuring accurate calculations. So we recommend engaging with a reliable team for the benchmarking, and you can understand your current position and what necessary adjustments you need to make to avoid penalties and to remain in compliance. Equally important is assembling a team to help you that can support you throughout the whole process, and we can do so. NERIS can help you with the planning and strategy, data collection and reporting, local law compliance, and also permitting. I think we have one more poll just to check on, yep, thank you.
What is the submission date for the decarbonization plan?
It is the same.
Oh, wait.
Yes,
let's
May 1st.
Hold on. Let's see what the responses.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the poll's in progress.
Okay, good.
Great. So everyone knows the submission date. So, and you know, NERIS is also here.
Just to clarify for attendees, right? You have two responses here. What is the date that the submission date for the decarbonization plan? Is it May 1st, 2025, or is it May 1st, 2027? You have a few people responding in different ways here.
Oh, okay.
So which date is the date? May 2025 or May 1st, 2027?
May 1st, 2025.
Great. So that's
coming up. But you have to meet the emissions limit by 2027. And now I just want to thank everyone for attending this webinar. And if there are any questions, we are open to answer it.
Right. So, well, thank you guys so much. There's a lot to go over here, and the details matter. So we do have one question that's coming in. Just a reminder for our attendees here, if you do have questions, you can go ahead and type that into your dashboard, your control panel. You go to webinar control panel has questions. There might be a little arrow that you have to push down if that's the case. And our first question came in, are you going to elaborate on that penalty structure, and does it start with 2024 reporting? So maybe Christine, I don't know if you or Maria have a response on that question.
Just want to clarify the question, just so I understand it. So the penalties would be issued for based on your 2025 report, and that report is actually for the previous year. I'm not sure when it will become enforceable, but I guess after DOB looks at your report, and then and then you have an option to either pay the penalties or go to adjudication by trial, or you could submit your report that is that's showing that you are non-compliant, and then you have to provide the good faith efforts decarbonization plan in tandem.
And so just to clarify, so in 2025, they submit their report for 2024, and the penalty structure would begin based off of that report in 2025. So implementing the best practices next year in 2024 is required, because you'll need to report on those in 2025, and that's what you're going to be getting assessed upon.
Right, exactly.
Perfect. We do have another question coming in. Can you elaborate on the special rules pertaining to requirements for affordable housing and places of worship, and how these may differ from regular commercial residential buildings?
So right now, I think it's still in discussion. I don't really know if anything is going to be announced prior to that, prior to 2024, but there has been some talk of a new DOB ruling which will go into affordable housing and the places of worship. So at this, I mean, I can double check everything if things are being issued constantly, so I'm not quite sure if I have the ability to answer that question at this moment.
And I'll also help to elaborate real quick. So we did add information into your handout section here. You've got 4 handouts as part of this program. There's a September 2023 Local Law 97 presentation edition in there. So information in there would be about that. They do tend to make changes on an ongoing and regular basis, so it is a good idea to check back and perhaps even contact them. But Christine, I believe you had an expansion on that.
Yes, and the handout that you're referencing, it is actually the DOB filing guide. So it was issued very recently. And my assumption in terms of houses of worship and affordable housing is they're going to be given some additional time to comply, or the compliance limits may be reduced. If you look at Local Law 147, which is an amendment to Local Law 97, in 2050, New York City agencies will be required to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by only 50%, whereas commercial buildings are required to reduce them by 80%. So it seems like they're going to be either given a little bit more time, or the emission limits are not going to be as stringent.
We have another question. It's a 2-part question that's come in. What filings are required to update building systems as indicated in the case study? And then the second question on this is, DOB familiar with and accepting the Energy Star program that you referred to?
So the Energy Star Portfolio Manager program is issued by EPA, and it has been required to be used in Local Law 84 with benchmarking, so annual reporting of energy and water consumption. It is also used in part in Local Law 87 in terms of energy audit and retro commissioning reports. So the Department of Buildings is familiar with the portfolio manager. Local Law 97 is essentially building on top of these previous local laws that have been passed. So we're just using the portfolio manager in a different way, and in a more detailed way. And, eventually, currently during the warm-up phase, as we mentioned, in 2024, you can choose whether you're going to use your DOB use group or coefficient or your portfolio manager, but eventually everything is going to be required in the portfolio manager. So we're going to see some of these DOB building code items evolve, I guess would be the best terms, to be consistent with the portfolio manager.
And are there any specific filings that are required to update the building systems like that were indicated in the case study that was presented?
So depending on the type of work, the scope of work that is proposed, the improvements that are proposed, there could be MEP filings that are associated with it, alteration filings if you're looking at, green roofs, solar would require filings as well. So it depends on the scope, but you're really going to be looking at, I think, MEP alterations, what were formerly called alteration type 2s and alteration type 3s. We wouldn't be looking at alt 1s or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, pretty standard. I've only looked a little bit into the filing guide, but the reporting is filed via DOB Now, which is DOB's new system, and so it'll just be similar as other filings. So
amazing. Well, we don't have any other questions in our queue here. We do have an appreciation, so you are very welcome. And thank you, Maria and Christine, for the overview of this program. Everyone will receive a copy of that presentation as well in our follow-up. There'll be a replay of this program as well. And then, of course, how can our viewers reach you, Maria and Christine? You go to the website, are there email contact addresses? How is your preference?
Sure. We actually have Local Law 97 at NERIS.NYC. You could also reach me directly, first initial, last name K, Sinkes at NERIS.NYC, or Maria Jurina, same first initial, last name at NERIS.NYC. And we look forward to hearing from you all and engaging further and seeing how we might be able to help you meet or exceed these new requirements. You're on mute, Alyssa.
Thank you. I was coughing. Local Law 97 at NERIS.NYC is probably the best one for you guys. You won't forget it. I thank you for your time today. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Christine. Without further ado.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Yeah, of course. All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.